Millionaire of the heart.
Chase Sullivan leaned back in the driver's seat of his sleek black Ferrari, watching the city of New York flash by in a blur of lights. The engine purred under his hand as he shifted gears, speeding down the wide streets that were still alive, even at this late hour. Times Square buzzed with energy, flashing billboards, glowing signs, and streams of people moving in every direction like ants in a colony. He glanced at his Rolex. It was just after midnight. A smirk tugged at the corners of his mouth. This was the life he'd always dreamed of, right? Fast cars, million-dollar penthouses, exclusive parties. At only 28, Chase had what most people could only fantasize about. And the best part? He had earned it all himself. No silver spoon, no inheritance, just grit, brains, and hustle. Chase Sullivan was a name people respected or envied, especially in the tech world. His company, Digicore, had taken the tech industry by storm. What had started as a small software project during his college years had turned into a multi-million-dollar company in less than a decade. His app, designed to help small businesses manage their online presence, had become indispensable for anyone trying to build a digital brand. Investors had poured in. Magazine covers had featured his face, calling him the new king of tech. He had even made Forbes' 30 Under 30 list, a moment that had marked his arrival in the world of the rich and powerful. Yet, as he sped through the neon-lit streets, a strange heaviness settled in his chest. He couldn't quite place it, but it had been creeping up on him lately, like a shadow he couldn't shake off. The parties were wild, the money was flowing, and the women were, well, plentiful. But none of it felt as exciting as it once had. As he pulled up to the entrance of his penthouse building, the valet sprang forward, opening the car door with a wide smile.
Good evening, Mr. Sullivan. Big night tonight?
Chase forced a smile and tossed the keys to the young man. Always. The valet's eyes gleamed as he slid into the Ferrari, driving it away with a bit too much enthusiasm. Chase shook his head with a chuckle and entered the building. The lobby was a symphony of polished marble, sparkling chandeliers, and quiet elegance. People glanced up as he passed, some whispering to each other as they recognized him. Upstairs, the elevator doors slid open to reveal his penthouse, an enormous space filled with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. The place looked like something out of a magazine spread: designer furniture, abstract art, and every gadget imaginable. It was spotless too, thanks to the cleaning service that came daily. Not that Chase would have noticed. He barely spent time here except to sleep. On those rare nights, he actually did. His phone buzzed as he crossed the room. A quick glance at the screen told him it was Derek, his business partner.
Chase, we're waiting for you at the club.
Derek's voice crackled through the line.
Yeah, I'm coming,
Chase said, half-heartedly.
Be there in 20.
Derek didn't even respond, just hung up. Chase tossed the phone onto the counter and walked over to the large windows. The city stretched out in front of him, vast and glittering. From up here, it looked so peaceful, so perfect, like a dreamscape. But he knew better. On the streets below, there was chaos. People hustling to make a living, families squeezed into tiny apartments, and countless others chasing after a piece of the same pie that he'd already claimed. It made him wonder how long it had been since he felt that hunger, that fire. He had once been like them, hungry for success, craving recognition, desperate to escape the mediocrity he'd grown up in. But now that he had it all, why didn't it feel as satisfying as he'd imagined? Chase grabbed a drink from the bar, swirling the amber liquid in his glass before taking a long sip. He had to admit, there was something hollow about his life now. The more he acquired, the less he seemed to feel. He had everything. Everything except the one thing that seemed to elude him. He thought back to his college days, back when his relationship with Lily Hartman had been the most important thing in his life. She had believed in him long before the rest of the world knew his name. They had been inseparable, their connection deep and electric. She wasn't like the women he met now. She had depth, passion, and dreams of her own. But as his obsession with his company grew, their love had started to fade. He had pushed her away, focused on climbing the ladder of success, and she had eventually walked out of his life. At first, he had told himself that it was for the best, that love was a distraction, something that could come later after he had made it. But now, standing in his luxury penthouse, staring out at the city he supposedly ruled, Chase couldn't help but feel that he had made a terrible mistake. The buzzing of his phone snapped him out of his thoughts. Derek again.
Where the hell are you, man? You're missing the best part of the night.
Chase sighed.
Yeah, I'll be there soon.
He hung up without waiting for a reply and downed the rest of his drink. The idea of going to yet another club, yet another VIP section, filled with beautiful but shallow people, didn't excite him like it used to. But what else was there to do? It's what people like him did. They partied, they drank, they spent obscene amounts of money on things they didn't need, and then they did it all over again the next night. It was a cycle, and Chase was caught in the middle of it. As he stepped into the elevator, a thought crossed his mind. What if he just didn't go? What if for once he skipped the scene and did something different? But different how? The truth was, Chase had no idea what different even looked like anymore. The elevator doors slid open, and he was greeted by the sound of laughter, music, and clinking glasses. The rooftop bar was alive with energy, filled with New York's elite, each more eager than the next to be seen, to be noticed. A few heads turned as he entered, people whispering as they realized who had just walked in. "Chase!" Derek's voice boomed from across the room. He waved him over, standing beside a group of models and influencers who were all smiles, their eyes lighting up at the sight of him. Chase forced another grin and made his way over. Derek handed him a drink already filled to the brim.
Finally, man. Thought you were gonna bail on us.
Derek said, slapping him on the back.
Nah, wouldn't miss it.
Chase lied, raising his glass. The night dragged on like countless others before it. Drinks, small talk, fake laughter, and people pretending to be interested in one another. Chase went through the motions, laughing at jokes he didn't find funny, making deals with people he didn't respect, and flirting with women who didn't care about anything but his bank account. Hours passed, and before long, he found himself standing alone at the edge of the rooftop, staring out at the city again. This time, though, it felt different. The city looked less like a dream and more like a cage, a shiny, golden cage that he had built for himself. A sudden wave of restlessness washed over him. He didn't belong here. Not anymore. Something inside him had shifted, and the life he had built, the life that had once seemed so perfect, now felt empty, meaningless. He needed something more. But what? Before he could dwell on it further, his phone buzzed again. But this time, it wasn't Derek or some random acquaintance. It was an unknown number, but the message made his heart skip a beat.
"I'm in town. We need to talk."
Lily. Chase's breath caught in his throat. Lily. After all these years, she was reaching out? Why now? What could she possibly want after all this time? A surge of emotions hit him. Excitement, fear, regret. The memories of their time together flooded his mind, but so did the mistakes, the pain of their breakup. What could she possibly have to say now? His fingers hovered over the screen as he debated how to respond. But deep down, he knew one thing for sure. Whatever she had to say, it wasn't going to be easy to hear. Without thinking, Chase grabbed his coat and made his way to the elevator, leaving the party and the noise behind. He needed answers, and for the first time in years, he felt something real, an urgency, a pull. And it scared him. As the elevator doors closed, Chase stared at the message again. His heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing with questions. Whatever was coming next, he wasn't ready for it. Chase Sullivan had never believed in love at first sight, until he met Lily Hartman. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the kind where the air felt just cold enough to make you pull your jacket tighter, and the trees blazed with reds and golds. Chase had been rushing across campus, late for a lecture, when he saw her. She was sitting under a large oak tree, a stack of books beside her, lost in thought as she scribbled in a notebook. Something about the way the sunlight filtered through the branches, casting dappled shadows on her face, made him stop in his tracks. Lily was beautiful, but not in the flashy, attention-grabbing way of most of the girls Chase had dated. She had a quiet beauty, the kind that snuck up on you. Her hair, a soft chestnut brown, fell in loose waves over her shoulders, and her hazel eyes sparkled with a warmth that drew people in. But it was her smile, bright and genuine, that captured Chase's attention the most. It wasn't just a smile, it was like sunshine breaking through a storm. For the first time in a long while, Chase felt nervous. He had no reason to be, of course. Back then, he was already popular on campus, smart, charming, and on his way to making a name for himself in the tech world. But there was something about Lily that made him feel different. So, instead of rushing past her like he would have done any other day, he paused, took a deep breath, and walked over to introduce himself.
Hey,
He said, his voice smooth but unsure.
what are you working on?
Lily looked up, startled at first, then smiled.
Oh, just an essay. Nothing exciting, I'm afraid.
Chase glanced at the cover of one of her books, Philosophy 101. He raised an eyebrow.
Philosophy? Now that's deep.
She chuckled softly.
I like asking big questions, trying to figure out life, you know.
He grinned, leaning against the tree beside her.
Sounds like a fun puzzle. I'm Chase, by the way.
I know.
She said, her eyes twinkling mischievously.
You're pretty famous around here. Tech prodigy, right?
Chase scratched the back of his neck, a bit embarrassed.
I wouldn't go that far, but yeah, I'm into tech.
Well, Chase,
Lily said, closing her notebook and looking up at him with genuine interest.
I'm Lily, and I have to say, I'm more interested in people than their resumes.
From that moment on, something clicked between them. What started as casual conversations about philosophy, technology, and life quickly grew into something deeper. They began spending more and more time together, talking late into the night in coffee shops or taking long walks around campus. Chase found himself opening up to her in ways he hadn't with anyone else. She had a way of making him feel understood, even when he didn't fully understand himself. Lily was different from the other girls Chase had known. She wasn't impressed by his success or the money his family had. She didn't care about fancy clothes or expensive gadgets. She was grounded, humble, and driven by a passion for making a difference in the world. Born and raised in a small town in upstate New York, Lily had come to college with a clear vision. She wanted to study social work, help people, and change lives. Chase admired her for it. But more than that, he loved her for it. The more time they spent together, the more Chase found himself falling for her. It wasn't just her beauty or her intelligence, it was the way she saw the world. Lily made him want to be a better person. With her, it wasn't about fame or money or success. It was about something deeper, something real. They were an unlikely pair. Chase, the wealthy tech genius from a powerful family, and Lily, the small-town girl with big dreams of helping others. But somehow they fit. They balanced each other out. Lily kept him grounded, reminding him that there was more to life than success, while Chase encouraged her to dream bigger, to believe that she could change the world. For a while, everything was perfect. They were inseparable, always laughing, always in sync. They spent weekends exploring the city, sneaking into late-night diners, or lying on rooftops staring at the stars and talking about the future. Chase had never felt more alive. But as graduation approached, things started to change. Chase's company, Digicor, was beginning to take off. Investors were calling, and meetings with potential partners took up more and more of his time. At first, Lily understood. She was proud of him, supportive even, encouraging him to chase his dreams. But as the months went by, Chase began to notice the cracks forming in their relationship. Lily would call, asking if they could spend time together, but Chase was always busy. He was either in a meeting, working on a new project, or flying to another city to meet with potential investors. Every time he promised her that things would slow down soon, that they would have more time together, but the truth was, his obsession with success was growing stronger. He had tasted what it was like to be on the verge of something huge, and it consumed him. Lily, on the other hand, started to feel more and more like she was losing him. The man she had fallen in love with, the one who cared about deep conversations and quiet moments, was slipping away. In his place was someone else, someone who was always on his phone, always thinking about the next big move. Chase had become obsessed with his company, and their relationship was no longer his priority. One night, after Chase had canceled their plans for the third time that week, Lily showed up at his apartment. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her eyes red from holding back tears.
Chase, we need to talk.
He barely looked up from his laptop.
I'm in the middle of something, Lily. Can it wait?
No, it can't.
Her voice was firm, but there was a tremor in it that made him finally close the computer and give her his full attention. "What's going on?" he asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew. Lily took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto his.
I don't know who you are anymore.
Chase frowned, standing up and walking over to her.
What are you talking about? I'm still me.
No, Chase, you're not.
She said, her voice breaking. The guy I fell in love with cared about people, about life, about us. But now, it's like you don't even see me. All you care about is work, money, and success. I've been standing here, waiting for you to notice that I'm slipping away, but you're too busy. Chase's stomach twisted. He had been so caught up in his own world, he hadn't realized how distant he had become.
Lily, I'm sorry.
I know I've been busy, but this is just for now. Once things settle down with the company, we'll have more time, I promise. Lily shook her head, her eyes filling with tears.
You've been saying that for months, Chase. And every time it's the same. I'm not asking for much. I just want you, us, to matter. But I don't think we do anymore.
Chase reached for her hand, but she pulled away.
Lily, don't say that. Of course, you matter to me.
Do I?
She whispered, her voice barely audible.
Because it feels like I'm competing with your company for your attention, and I'm losing.
For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy, filled with everything they were too afraid to say. Chase wanted to tell her that she was wrong, that she was more important to him than anything. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. He had let his ambition take over, and now he was paying the price.
I can't keep doing this.
Lily said softly, breaking the silence.
I love you, Chase, but I can't keep waiting for you to choose me.
Chase's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the woman he loved standing in front of him, breaking right before his eyes. He wanted to fix it, to make it better, but he didn't know how. Every part of him wanted to tell her he'd change, that he'd make time for her, for them, but he knew it was a lie. He couldn't walk away from Digicor, not now, not when he was so close to making it big. Lily took a shaky breath and looked at him one last time.
I need to go.
Lily, wait.
Chase said, panic rising in his chest, but she didn't stop. She turned and walked out the door, leaving Chase standing there, feeling more lost than he ever had before. He stood frozen for a long time after she left, his mind racing, his heart aching. Part of him wanted to run after her, to beg her to stay, but another part of him, the part that craved success, kept him rooted in place. And so Chase let her go, convincing himself that it was the right thing to do. He told himself that there would be other chances, that once he had made it, he could fix things with Lily. But deep down, he knew that by the time he was ready, it would be too late. And as the door clicked shut, a sinking feeling settled in his chest. A feeling that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Chase Sullivan stood in front of the mirror in his penthouse bathroom, adjusting his tie. His reflection stared back at him, the same sharp features, the same confident smile, but underneath it all, there was a flicker of unease. It was the day of Digicor's annual shareholders meeting, and Chase knew that the stakes had never been higher. His company, once hailed as the next big thing in tech, had been hit with a string of bad press and financial missteps recently. He tried to push away the thoughts swirling in his head, tried to remind himself that this was just another hurdle. He had faced challenges before. The market fluctuated, competitors emerged, but he had always managed to come out on top. This time would be no different, or so he hoped. As he tightened his tie one last time, his phone buzzed on the counter. It was a message from Derek, his business partner, and one of his oldest friends.
We need to talk. Now.
The words sent a shiver down his spine. Derek never texted like that. Short, to the point, and with an edge of urgency. Something was wrong. Chase's fingers hovered over the phone for a moment before he responded.
I'm on my way. What's going on?
No reply. Derek was usually quick to respond, but this silence only fueled Chase's growing anxiety. He left his penthouse, the luxurious space that once felt like a sanctuary, but now felt more like a cage. As he rode the elevator down, his mind raced. The last few months had been a whirlwind. Rumors of embezzlement within Digicor had surfaced, and while Chase had dismissed them at first, the whispers had grown louder. Some key investors had pulled out, the stock had taken a hit, and internal audits had revealed some troubling discrepancies in the company's finances. But Derek had assured him that everything was being handled. He had been by Chase's side since the beginning, and if there was anyone Chase could trust, it was Derek. Right? Stepping out of the elevator, Chase entered the lobby where his driver was waiting to take him to the office. As the car weaved through the busy New York streets, Chase's unease only deepened. His mind wandered back to all the strange moments he had brushed off in recent months. Derek being secretive about meetings, missing funds that were explained away, and the tense arguments between department heads. Maybe he had been too focused on expanding the business, too blind to see what was really happening. When Chase arrived at the Digicor headquarters, the atmosphere was different. The usual buzz of activity was gone, replaced by a strange quiet. People avoided his gaze as he walked through the hallways, and he could feel the tension in the air. Something was terribly wrong. He pushed open the door to his office and found Derek sitting at his desk, staring down at a stack of papers, his face pale.
Derek,
Chase began, closing the door behind him.
what's going on? Why did you send that message?
Derek looked up, his eyes heavy with guilt. He opened his mouth to speak, but hesitated, as if searching for the right words.
We're in trouble, Chase.
Derek finally said, his voice low.
Serious trouble.
Chase's heart sank.
What do you mean? What kind of trouble?
Derek stood up, running a hand through his hair, pacing the room.
I don't even know where to start. The audits, they found something, Chase. They found money missing and they're pointing fingers at us.
Us?
Chase frowned.
So what are you talking about? I haven't touched a dime of the company's money that wasn't accounted for.
Derek paused, his shoulders slumping.
I know, but they don't care about that. To them, we're the ones in charge, and if something goes wrong, we're the ones they're going to blame. And there's more.
Chase's stomach churned as he leaned against the desk.
What do you mean, more?
Derek glanced around nervously, as if someone might be listening.
I think someone inside the company is framing us. I've been digging through the records, and there are payments that don't make sense. Large sums disappearing into shell companies, deals that I didn't authorize. At first, I thought it was just a mistake, but now I'm not so sure.
Chase felt the room spin around him.
Who would do this, and why?
Derek shook his head, looking defeated.
I don't know, but it's bad, Chase. The investors are freaking out. They're demanding answers, and we don't have any. If we don't fix this fast, we're done. Digicor is done.
Chase stood in stunned silence. He had always been in control, always been the one with the answers. But now his entire world was unraveling, and he had no idea how to stop it.
We need to go public, Chase said, his voice firm. We need to call a press conference, explain everything, and make it clear that we're handling the situation.
Derek looked at him, panic flashing in his eyes.
You don't understand, Chase. It's too late for that. The media already knows. The story's going live tonight. By tomorrow, everyone's going to know about the missing money, the bad investments, everything. And when they do, they're going to crucify us.
Chase's heart raced as his mind scrambled for a solution. How had it come to this? How had his empire, the company he had built from nothing, spiraled so far out of control? Suddenly his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from a news app. He clicked on it, his blood running cold as he read the headline. Scandal at Digicor, CEO Chase Sullivan accused of embezzlement and fraud. The article was already out. It detailed accusations against both Chase and Derek, claiming that they had siphoned millions from the company to fund their lavish lifestyles. There were anonymous sources, statements from former employees, and leaked financial documents that painted a damning picture. Chase scrolled through the article, his hands shaking. The media had already made up their minds. He was guilty, and Digicor was crumbling.
How did this happen?
Chase whispered, staring at the screen in disbelief.
I don't know.
Derek muttered, sinking into a chair.
But we're screwed.
Over the next few weeks, everything unraveled at an alarming speed. Investors pulled out, board members resigned, and lawsuits began piling up. Every attempt Chase made to clear his name only seemed to make things worse. The media hounded him relentlessly, splashing his face across every headline with phrases like corporate greed and billionaire fraudster. Public opinion turned against him, and even his once loyal supporters started to distance themselves. One by one, his closest friends, those who had been at his side during the rise of Digicor, began to disappear. Phone calls went unanswered, Invitations were rescinded, and doors that had once been wide open were now firmly closed. The parties, the VIP treatment, the respect he had earned, gone in the blink of an eye. Even his family, who had once been so proud of his accomplishments, grew distant. His father, a respected businessman in his own right, called him a disgrace. His mother, though softer in her words, expressed her disappointment. Chase had brought shame to their name, and in their world, reputation was everything. As his personal and professional life collapsed, Chase was forced to liquidate his assets just to stay afloat. His penthouse, his cars, his investments, everything he had worked for was sold off to cover the mounting legal fees and debts. It was a slow, painful process, each sale chipping away at what remained of his dignity. The final blow came when the board of Digicor voted to remove him as CEO. Chase, the man who had built the company from the ground up, was ousted from his own creation. The betrayal stung more than anything else, especially when he learned that Derek had been the one leading the charge to remove him. His oldest friend, the one person he thought he could trust, had turned on him. Chase couldn't believe it at first. Derek had been like a brother to him. They had started Digicor together, shared the ups and downs, celebrated the victories. But in the end, Derek had sided with the board, claiming that it was the only way to save the company. Chase confronted him in the office one last time.
How could you do this to me?
Chase demanded, his voice hoarse with anger. Derek didn't meet his eyes.
I didn't have a choice, Chase. This is bigger than us. The company's falling apart, and if you stayed on, it would have gone under. This was the only way.
The only way? Chase scoffed. You betrayed me, Derek. You sold me out to save your own skin.
Derek's face hardened.
You think this is easy for me? You think I wanted this? I did what I had to do to survive. Maybe if you hadn't been so obsessed with building an empire, you would have seen what was happening right under your nose.
Chase felt the words hit him like a punch to the gut. He had been blind, too focused on growing Digicor to see the warning signs. But that didn't make Derek's betrayal any less painful.
Get out,
Chase whispered, his voice filled with quiet fury. I don't ever want to see you again. Derek hesitated for a moment, as if he wanted to say something, but then he turned and walked out of the office, leaving Chase standing alone in the ruins of what had once been his kingdom. As the door clicked shut behind Derek, Chase felt the weight of everything crashing down on him. His company, his friendships, his reputation, everything he had built was gone. But in that moment, standing alone in his empty office, Chase felt something else stir deep within him. A flicker of something that had been dormant for a long time. Determination. This wasn't the end. Not yet. Chase Sullivan sat on the cold, hard floor of his small apartment, staring at the cracked walls and peeling paint. The air was musty, the tiny space barely enough to fit a bed and a table. It was a far cry from the life he once knew, the penthouses, the marble floors, the skyline views of New York City. Now the only view he had was a dirty alley filled with overflowing trash bins and stray cats searching for scraps. It had been months since the fall. Months since he had lost his company, his friends, his fortune. Every day felt like a reminder of how far he had fallen, how fast everything had slipped through his fingers. Chase's hands were rough now, calloused from the jobs he had taken to make ends meet. His once pristine suits had been replaced by second-hand clothes, and the only shoes he had left had holes in them. He looked at the calendar on the wall. He had circled today's date. Rent was due tomorrow, and he didn't have enough. The apartment was cheap, but even that was too much for him now. His stomach growled, pulling him from his thoughts. He hadn't eaten since yesterday, and even then, it was a cold sandwich from a corner store. He couldn't remember the last time he had a hot meal. Chase sighed and stood up, grabbing his jacket from the back of the chair. It was threadbare, barely offering any warmth, but it was all he had. He needed to head to the diner. It wasn't much, but the job was the only thing keeping him from being completely on the streets. He had never imagined that one day he would be waiting tables, scrubbing floors, and washing dishes just to survive. As he left the apartment and stepped out into the cold, bustling city streets, Chase felt invisible. He used to be someone people noticed, someone people wanted to be around. Now he was just another face in the crowd, ignored by the very people who once admired him. The world didn't care that he was Chase Sullivan, former millionaire. Out here, he was just a nobody. The diner wasn't far from his apartment, but the walk always felt long. The neighborhood was rough. Abandoned buildings, graffiti-covered walls, and the distant sound of sirens seemed to be constant. Chase kept his head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone he passed. He wasn't afraid, but the shame was always there, gnawing at him. He didn't want to be recognized, didn't want anyone to see what he had become. When he finally reached the diner, he pushed open the door and was greeted by the familiar smell of greasy food and stale coffee. The place was small, a hole-in-the-wall joint that catered to blue-collar workers, truck drivers, and people just trying to get by. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a job.
Hey Chase, you're late.
Gloria, the diner's manager, called from behind the counter. She was a tough woman in her 50s, with a raspy voice and a cigarette always hanging from her lips. She didn't care about his past, didn't care who he used to be. To her, he was just another worker.
Sorry, Gloria.
Chase muttered, quickly tying an apron around his waist.
It won't happen again.
It better not.
She grumbled, eyeing him suspiciously.
Now get to work. Table 6 is waiting.
Chase grabbed a notepad and made his way to the table, forcing a smile as he approached a group of construction workers. They barely looked at him as they ordered, their voices gruff and impatient. He scribbled down their requests and headed back to the kitchen to pass on the orders. As he worked, Chase's mind wandered. How had it come to this? He remembered the days when he would walk into high-end restaurants, greeted by name, given the best table in the house. Now, he was on the other side, serving food to people who didn't even acknowledge his existence. The hours dragged on, and as the diner filled up, Chase found himself running back and forth, refilling coffee, taking orders, cleaning up spills. It was exhausting, both physically and mentally. He wasn't used to this kind of work. His body ached and his feet were sore by the end of his shift. But it wasn't just the physical toll. The emotional weight of it all was heavier. Every rude customer, every impatient glare reminded him of how far he had fallen. He had once been at the top of the world, commanding respect, power, and wealth. Now people talked down to him, treated him like he was nothing. And maybe, he thought bitterly, maybe he was nothing. As the day wore on, the diner quieted down, and Chase found himself alone at the counter, wiping down tables. Gloria was in the back, counting the till, and the last of the customers had left. Chase took a moment to rest, leaning against the counter and rubbing his tired eyes. That's when he heard the door open. He looked up to see a man walk in, wearing a worn-out jacket and carrying a bag. His face was gaunt, and his eyes had a hollow look to them, but there was something familiar about him. Chase stared at him for a moment before recognition hit him like a freight train. It was Derek. The man who had once been his closest friend, the man who had betrayed him, the man who had led the charge to remove him from his own company. Chase's heart pounded in his chest as a flood of emotions washed over him. Anger, betrayal, confusion. He hadn't seen Derek since that day in the office, the day Derek had walked out and left him to deal with the wreckage of his life. Derek hadn't noticed him yet. He was standing by the counter, waiting to be seated, looking tired and worn. Chase took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Part of him wanted to confront Derek, to demand answers, to unleash all the anger he had been carrying for months. But another part of him, a quieter part, wondered what had brought Derek to this diner. Before he could make a decision, Gloria emerged from the back, cigarette still in hand. She glanced at Derek and then at Chase.
Go on, take his order,
she said, not noticing the tension between them. Chase hesitated for a moment, but then, without a word, he grabbed his notepad and approached Derek's table.
What can I get you?
Chase asked, his voice tight. Derek looked up, and the moment their eyes met, recognition dawned on Derek's face. His eyes widened in shock.
Chase?
Derek whispered, disbelief evident in his voice. Chase didn't respond, just stood there, waiting for Derek to say something else. But Derek seemed at a loss for words. The two men stared at each other for a long, tense moment before Derek finally spoke again.
I didn't expect to see you here,
Derek said, his voice shaky.
Yeah, well, life has a way of surprising you.
Chase replied, his tone cold. Derek swallowed hard, looking around the diner as if searching for an escape.
I don't know what to say.
Chase clenched his jaw.
You don't have to say anything. Just tell me what you want to order.
Derek opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked like a man who had lost everything, and for the first time, Chase saw him for what he really was, a broken man, just like him.
I didn't come here to fight.
Derek finally said, his voice soft.
I'm just trying to get by, same as you.
Chase felt a pang of something he hadn't expected, pity. As much as he wanted to hate Derek, as much as he wanted to blame him for everything, he couldn't deny the truth. They were both in the same place now, both struggling to survive.
Yeah,
Chase muttered, glancing down at his notepad.
I guess we are.
Derek shifted uncomfortably in his seat.
Look, Chase, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but I didn't think things would turn out like this. I didn't think either of us would end up.
Like this?
Chase finished for him, gesturing around the dingy diner. Derek nodded, looking ashamed. Chase didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to walk away, to leave Derek sitting there in his guilt. But another part of him, the part that had been humbled by his own fall from grace, knew that holding on to the anger wouldn't change anything. Before Chase could respond, the door to the diner opened again, and a group of rowdy customers walked in, disrupting the moment. Gloria called out from the counter, telling Chase to get back to work. Chase looked at Derek one last time before turning away, leaving his former friend sitting there in silence. But as he returned to the counter to take the new customer's orders, the weight of the encounter lingered in his chest. The past was still there, hanging over him like a dark cloud, and Chase couldn't shake the feeling that Derek's return was only the beginning of something much bigger. Chase stood behind the counter of the diner, pouring coffee for a regular who barely acknowledged his presence. The clinking of silverware and the chatter of customers surrounded him, but today felt different. The weight of the world hung heavy on his shoulders as he wiped down the same spot on the counter for the 5th time. It was a mindless task that gave him a moment to escape his thoughts. But just as he was about to pour another cup of coffee, the bell above the door jingled, and he looked up. His heart stopped. Lily Hartman stood in the doorway. Chase's breath caught in his throat. She looked different, older, but somehow still the same. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore simple clothes that reflected her down-to-earth nature. She had always been a breath of fresh air, a stark contrast to the world he had come from, but now there was something else in her eyes, something deeper, more mature. For a moment, time froze. Chase felt the memories rush back like a flood. He remembered the late-night study sessions, the laughter, the way they could talk for hours about their dreams. But those memories were tainted by the pain of their breakup, a wound that had never really healed.
Chase?
Lily's voice was soft, breaking the spell. She took a step inside, looking around the diner.
Wow, this place is cozy.
He forced a smile, trying to hide his nerves.
Yeah, it's not exactly a 5-star restaurant, but it's a job.
Lily walked closer, her gaze searching his face.
How have you been?
Chase scratched the back of his head, unsure how to answer.
I've been surviving.
The air between them felt thick with unspoken words. They hadn't seen each other in years, not since the day he had chosen ambition over love, when he had pushed her away in his pursuit of success.
Can I get you something? He asked.
Trying to sound casual.
I'll just have a coffee, please.
She replied, her voice steady. As he poured her coffee, he couldn't help but notice how much she had changed. The girl he had fallen in love with was gone, replaced by a woman who had seen the world and fought hard to carve out a place for herself. But despite her strength, there was a sadness in her eyes, a reminder of the dreams they once shared. He set the steaming mug in front of her and took a seat across the table, feeling the weight of their shared history hovering between them.
So, what are you up to these days?
Lily took a sip of her coffee, her gaze fixed on the table for a moment before looking up.
I'm working as a social worker now. I help families in need, people who are struggling. It's tough, but it feels good to make a difference.
Chase nodded, impressed despite himself.
That sounds meaningful. You always wanted to help people.
She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes.
What about you? Are you still in tech?
Chase hesitated, the memories of his downfall rushing back anymore.
I lost my company. Things haven't been great.
He watched as her expression shifted, the concern in her eyes evident.
I'm sorry to hear that, Chase. I read about it in the news. I can't imagine how hard that must be.
Yeah, it's been rough.
He admitted, feeling a mix of shame and vulnerability.
I didn't realize how much my life was tied to my success until it was gone. It's like I don't even know who I am anymore.
There was a long pause as Lily processed his words. Chase could see the questions swirling in her mind, but she didn't push him. Instead, she focused on her coffee, tracing her finger around the rim of the cup.
I've been thinking a lot about the past lately.
Chase continued, breaking the silence.
About us. I wish I had done things differently.
Lily looked up, her expression shifting from concern to something more guarded.
Chase, we both made choices. You were chasing your dreams, and I couldn't compete with that.
No,
He replied, leaning forward.
you deserved better. I was so obsessed with money and success that I didn't see what was right in front of me. I lost you because of that.
The weight of his confession hung in the air between them, heavy and unresolved. Chase felt a rush of emotions, regret, longing, and a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way back to each other. Lily's gaze softened, and for a moment he saw a glimpse of the girl he had fallen in love with. But it quickly vanished, replaced by the walls she had built to protect herself.
I've moved on, Chase. It's been years. I can't go back to what we had.
Why not?
He asked, his voice barely above a whisper.
Don't you ever think about us?
She sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly.
Of course I do, but thinking about it doesn't change what happened. You wanted a different life, and I didn't fit into that picture.
Chase clenched his fists, frustration boiling inside him.
I didn't know what I wanted. I thought success would bring me happiness, but it only brought me loneliness. I pushed you away, and I've regretted it every single day since.
Lily's expression hardened again, and Chase could see the hurt beneath her calm facade.
You have to understand, Chase. It wasn't just about you. I lost myself in your world, trying to keep up with your ambitions. I thought we could make it work, but in the end, it felt like I was competing with your dreams, not sharing them.
He swallowed hard, the truth of her words hitting him like a punch to the gut.
I was selfish. I didn't see how my drive affected you. I thought I was doing it for us, but I was really doing it for me.
She looked away, her eyes glistening with unshed tears.
You were living in a world of luxury, and I was just trying to survive. I wanted to be with you, but you were always too busy for me. You didn't even notice when I started to fade away.
Chase's heart sank as he realized the extent of his failure.
I never wanted you to feel that way. I thought if I could make something of myself, I could provide for us. I thought I was doing the right thing.
But it wasn't about money.
Lily said softly.
It was about being present, being there for each other. I needed you, and you were chasing something that ultimately left you empty.
The truth of her words stung, and Chase felt a deep ache in his chest.
I'm sorry, Lily. I'm so sorry for everything. I wish I could take it all back.
Lily looked at him, her expression a mix of sadness and understanding.
We can't change the past, Chase. We can only move forward. I've learned to let go, but it's hard to forget.
Chase nodded, feeling the weight of regret settle heavily on his shoulders.
I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope one day you can find it in your heart. I've changed, Lily. I want to be better.
They sat in silence for a moment, the tension between them palpable. Chase wanted to reach out, to touch her hand and tell her that everything would be okay, but he held back, unsure if he had the right. Just then, the bell above the door jingled again, and a group of customers walked in, breaking the moment. Chase glanced over, momentarily distracted, but when he turned back to Lily, she was already standing up.
I should go.
She said, her voice barely above a whisper.
Wait.
Chase said, panic rising in his chest.
Can we talk again? I mean, can we meet up sometime?
Lily hesitated, looking torn.
I don't know, Chase. It's complicated.
I understand.
He replied, desperation creeping into his voice.
But I need to know if there's still something between us. I need to know if I can make things right.
Her eyes softened again, and for a moment, he thought she might agree, but then she shook her head slowly.
I need time, Chase. I can't just jump back into things.
Okay,
He said, trying to hide his disappointment.
just think about it, please.
Lily nodded, but as she turned to leave, Chase couldn't shake the feeling that this might be his last chance. Lily, he called after her. She stopped and turned back, her expression serious.
I really am sorry.
I know, she said, her voice thick with emotion.
Just take care of yourself, okay?
And with that, she walked out of the diner, leaving Chase feeling empty once again. He watched her go, the door swinging shut behind her, and a wave of sadness washed over him. The connection they had shared was still there, but the road ahead felt uncertain. As he stood there, surrounded by the noise of the diner, Chase couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had changed. He had been given a glimpse of the past, a chance to confront the mistakes he had made. But would it be enough to push him toward the future he truly wanted? He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. There was still so much to figure out, and the journey ahead would be anything but easy. But one thing was clear. He couldn't ignore the past any longer. He had to confront it head-on if he ever hoped to find redemption.